The Great Question. Imagine waking up one day to find the world exactly as you left it. The walls of your room are the same pale beige. Your phone lies face down beside your bed, waiting. Outside your window, people are walking briskly to places they don't want to be, wearing expressions they didn't choose, reciting words they didn't write. It all seems normal, ordinary even, but something is wrong. There's a subtle dissonance in the air, like hearing your favorite song played half a note off-key. You feel it in your stomach before you can name it. A quiet unrest, the eerie sensation that your life is being lived for you, not by you. You check your messages, notifications buzz, deadlines loom. You follow the routine like clockwork, yet with each passing moment, something inside you whispers, "This isn't freedom. This is theater." Now pause. Ask yourself, what does it mean to be truly free? Is it the ability to choose what you eat, what job you take, what people you surround yourself with? Is it voting every few years or choosing between 50 brands of shampoo? Or is freedom something deeper, quieter, far more elusive, something that cannot be bought, marketed, or performed? You believe you're free because no one is visibly pointing a gun at your head, but is coercion always that obvious? What if the chains are invisible, made not of steel, but of expectations? What if you've been trained to mistake your cage for a kingdom? You scroll through social media and each post shouts a prescription for how to live. Be more confident, work harder, travel more, eat clean, manifest success. You believe you're making choices, but the options were curated long before you arrived. Your desires are predictable, your beliefs algorithmically reinforced. The system doesn't need to shackle your limbs, it only needs to shape your impulses. And so it does, subtly, relentlessly, until you begin to confuse what you've been told to want with what you truly desire. But wait, you might protest. I chose my career, I chose my partner, I chose this life. But did you? Or were those choices laid out like a carefully scripted menu, giving you the illusion of agency while keeping you locked within a narrow framework? Here's the paradox. The more convinced you are of your freedom, the more likely you are to be under its most sophisticated form of control. Because real captivity isn't loud. It doesn't come with flashing lights or obvious bars. It comes dressed as comfort. It speaks the language of routine. It wears the mask of achievement. And above all, it rewards you just enough to keep you from questioning too deeply. After all, who wants to disturb the illusion when the illusion feels good? But illusions have a cost. Beneath the surface of comfort lies a gnawing emptiness. You start feeling anxious in quiet moments, bored in stillness, terrified by silence. You become addicted to stimulation, to noise, to productivity, not because they fulfill you, but because they distract you from asking the one question your environment doesn't want you to ask. Who am I when I am not performing? You see, true freedom begins the moment performance ends. But most people never get there. They live entire lives in well-decorated prisons, chasing versions of success that were never truly their own. And the tragedy is not that they are trapped, but that they will never realize it. Because to see the bars is to risk everything: comfort, identity, approval. And yet the cost of not seeing them is even greater. It is the slow erosion of self, the quiet death of authenticity, the disconnection from the raw, unfiltered pulse of your own existence. So the question remains, if you're not truly free, who or what is pulling your strings? And more importantly, can you ever reclaim them? Let's begin. The hidden problem. Its psychological, philosophical roots. You see, the illusion of freedom is the most effective kind of cage. Not because it binds your hands or locks your feet, but because it persuades your mind that the chains no longer exist. When you're convinced you're free, you stop looking for the bars. You laugh off warnings. You scoff at the suggestion that anything might be controlling you. You say things like, "No one tells me what to do," or "I'm just being myself," not realizing that the very definition of yourself was whispered into your ears by forces you never noticed. Advertising algorithms, childhood authority figures, cultural norms, traumas you've buried so deep you forgot they were ever there. But here's where it gets darker. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." What he meant is that society will never stop trying to mold you. It needs to. It can't function otherwise. Your family, your country, your workplace, they all operate like little machines, and every machine needs parts that fit, not parts that question, not parts that change shape. So from the moment you were born, those around you began trimming your edges, telling you who you are, rewarding certain traits and punishing others, praise for obedience, disappointment for deviation. You learned early on what made people love you and what made them pull away. And so you chose, unconsciously, to become the version of you that felt safest. That's not freedom. That's adaptation. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, called this adapted self the persona, the mask we wear to survive social life. It's not who we are. It's who we pretend to be, so we're accepted. But here's the tragedy. The longer you wear the mask, the more you forget there's anything beneath it. You become so good at playing the role that eventually you start mistaking the performance for reality. This is where people get stuck. This is the root of the discomfort they can't quite name. It's why so many people feel whole, at the center of their lives. They've become their persona, their real self, the one with dangerous desires, strange ideas, chaotic feelings, has been buried beneath years of being normal, of being good, of being likable. You might say, but I make my own choices. I picked my career, my clothes, my friends. Did you really? Or did you just follow the invisible scripts handed to you by others? Did you become a doctor because you were passionate about healing or because your family valued prestige? Do you dress the way you do because it expresses your essence or because you're scared of seeming weird? Do you surround yourself with people who challenge you or people who reflect back the image you've carefully constructed? Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, argued that human beings can endure almost any suffering if they find meaning in it. But he also warned of the existential vacuum, a state where people feel deeply empty, not because of pain, but because they're living according to values that aren't truly theirs. They chase goals handed down by the culture: money, fame, stability. They climb the ladder, only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. And when they finally reach the top, the view doesn't fulfill them. It haunts them. Why? Because they were never truly free to begin with. Arthur Schopenhauer, the German philosopher, took it even further. He claimed that free will is an illusion, that we are driven not by rational thought, but by a blind, insatiable will to live, a chaotic force beneath all our actions. You think you're choosing, but really you're reacting. Reacting to fear, to pain, to unmet needs from childhood. A person who appears calm and polite might just be avoiding conflict because they learned long ago that anger leads to abandonment. A person who seems confident and ambitious may be compensating for deep-seated shame. The decisions we call free are often just patterns, emotional echoes of a time we barely remember. Even your idea of freedom itself, what it looks like, what it feels like, might not be your own. Some people define freedom as having choices. Others define it as doing what they want without judgment. But both definitions assume that you even know what you truly want, and that's not guaranteed. In fact, as psychologist Carl Rogers said, most people live lives of quiet desperation, fulfilling roles society gave them while quietly hungering for something they can't name. Is it any wonder then that people who seem to have it all, wealth, power, love, often feel numb? They didn't choose their path. They followed it, and it led them not to fulfillment, but to confusion. That's not freedom. That's hypnosis. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, believed that we are condemned to be free, that even when we don't want to, we must make choices, and those choices define us. But the modern person avoids this terrifying responsibility by hiding behind structures. It's what my parents wanted. It's just how the world works. Everyone else is doing it. These are all ways of running from freedom, of trading it in for comfort, predictability, or belonging. And society loves when you do that, because a truly free individual is unpredictable, uncontrollable, dangerous. That's why the hidden problem is so pervasive. You are surrounded by people who are not themselves. They are versions of who they think they should be. and you likely are too. The tragedy is not that you're trapped. The tragedy is that you've learned to love the cage, that you've decorated it, polished the bars, called it home, but something inside you still knows. It stirs late at night when everything is quiet, when the mask slips, when your soul whispers, "This isn't all there is." That's not your imagination. Autu, that's the real you, the part that hasn't given up, the part that remembers freedom. The question is, will you listen? The unseen consequences. And now we arrive at the part most people never notice, the part that quietly dictates the shape of your life. Not the grand tragedies, nor the loud defeats, but the soft, almost imperceptible compromises, the slow erosion of something sacred, the flickering moments when your gut tells you to act, to say something honest, to scream in joy or in sorrow, but you don't. Not because someone stopped you, not because a law forbade it, but because of a deeply conditioned whisper inside you that says, "Don't be too much." That whisper is not yours. It was given to you, cultured into you. It is the true architect of your cage. What happens when this whisper goes unchecked? When people walk through decades of life with the illusion of freedom, but their instincts are muffled, their curiosities dulled, and their passions filed down to polite acceptability? What happens is this. They begin to build lives based not on their desires, but on what will cause the least disturbance. Their jobs are chosen not because they are fulfilling, but because they are considered realistic. Their relationships are not deeply connected, but simply tolerable. Their emotions don't surge, they hum dully in the background like an old refrigerator. And all the while, they think they are choosing. They are not. They are complying. Not with a tyrant, not with a dictator, but with an inherited blueprint of how one should live. And they pay a price. Not in money or blood, but in numbness, in the hollow feeling at the center of a supposedly good life. This is the invisible tax of false freedom. One of the most insidious features of modern life is that the cage is internalized. In earlier centuries, control came from the outside. Governments, empires, churches wielded control overtly. But now the control comes dressed in self-help slogans and lifestyle aesthetics. You're not told directly how to live, but you are shown what a normal life looks like. You're told that happiness is a curated home, a productivity routine, a fit body, and a weekend trip to a scenic location. You're told that freedom means having many choices, but not that those choices are all designed within the same cultural echo chamber. You scroll, you compare, and then you comply. Not because you were forced, but because your imagination was quietly replaced. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han wrote about what he calls the achievement society, a world where people no longer feel exploited by others, but where they exploit themselves in pursuit of optimized living. This, he argues, is the most efficient form of control, when the subject believes they are the master, even while they are grinding themselves into misery. You hustle harder, not because someone demanded it, but because you want to. You post more, share more, perform more, not for survival, but for approval. You have become your own warden. Think of this. A man wakes up every day, puts on a tie, drives to an office he doesn't care about, works on tasks that bore him, answers to managers who don't inspire him, and then goes home to collapse into a screen. He tells himself he is free because no one is holding a gun to his head. But the real prison is not made of bars. It's made of routines, expectations, and internalized rules. He is technically free to walk away, but mentally, emotionally, he cannot even imagine doing so. He has inherited a script, and it has become his only known language. And what of creativity? What of love? What of spiritual longing? All of these begin to suffocate under the weight of manufactured obligations. You start to believe that play is a waste of time, that stillness is laziness, that longing is weakness. You're trained to be productive, not to be whole. You mistake busyness for purpose, and in that confusion, your real freedom dies silently. Even rebellion itself becomes co-opted. Fashion, music, trends, they appear countercultural but are quickly absorbed, sold back, and turned into aesthetic performance. The teenager who rebels through a viral trend is still caught in a structure that dictates their rebellion's form. Every rebellion that is permitted by the system is no rebellion at all. And in this way, even your resistance becomes part of the machinery. The consequences go even deeper. Relationships begin to suffer because no one knows how to be vulnerable anymore. Everyone's performing. You're not connecting soul to soul. You're exchanging polished masks. People fall in love not with the raw, messy humanness of each other, but with projections, personas, filtered versions. And so even intimacy becomes a stage. Even love is reduced to a performance of compatibility. What kind of world is this, where people die with their song still in them, not because they weren't allowed to sing, but because they never realized they were silent? What kind of inner freedom is possible when you don't even know you've been taught to suppress your own wildness, your own defiance, your own sacred strangeness? The unseen consequence of this illusion of freedom is not just personal numbness, it is civilizational stagnation. When everyone is quietly conforming, who builds the new world? Who challenges the sacred cows? Who dreams outside the grid? The machine grinds on, fueled by the quiet compliance of billions who still call themselves free. You may think you're making your own choices, but you're doing so with tools you didn't choose, in a language you didn't invent, chasing dreams you didn't author. And that realization, when it hits, is not just disturbing, it's devastating, because it means the life you thought was yours might not be. But it's also the beginning of something powerful. For once, you see the walls of the invisible cage. You can begin to study them. You can trace their contours, map their origins, and maybe find a way to slip through the cracks. And that's where we're going next, the final, most powerful realization. And so you stand at the precipice of a realization that could undo every illusion you've ever held dear. You've traced the invisible chains, through fear, through conditioning, through the subtle whispers of culture and history. You've seen how autonomy was never quite yours, not fully, not freely. You've discovered that the self who makes choices is often just a mirror, reflecting someone else's image, someone else's values, someone else's voice. But now, let us descend one layer deeper, not into despair, but into awakening. Because here's the cruel, beautiful, terrifying paradox. True freedom does not lie in doing whatever you want. It lies in wanting what is true. Most people live like prisoners set loose inside a larger cage. The walls are harder to see because they're not physical. They're mental, emotional, metaphysical. You were never meant to break all rules, to run wild in chaos. That's not freedom. That's another form of captivity, the captivity of impulse. You were meant to see the game for what it is, to step outside the roles, not by rejecting them entirely, but by choosing them consciously with eyes open. Imagine a theater. You've been an actor your whole life, but the moment you realize the script was written for you, not by you, something inside starts to burn. And if you're brave enough, you walk off that stage, not to exit the play, but to rewrite the lines. But here's the twist. When you truly awaken, you realize there is no script at all. There never was. Only the fear of silence, the dread of uncertainty, and the seduction of belonging. That's what kept you reading lines. That's what made you think the role was you. But when you walk beyond that fear, a strange peace begins to dawn. Not comfort, not numbness, clarity. You realize that real freedom is not the absence of influence, but the awareness of it. You can never fully escape culture, biology, language, trauma, or even memory, but you can stop letting them pilot your ship blindly. You can step into the captain's chair, not as a god, not as a sovereign being above all forces, but as a witness who chooses with open eyes. When Sartre said existence precedes essence, he wasn't inviting you into chaos. He was daring you to become your own sculptor. When Viktor Frankl wrote of finding meaning even inside a concentration camp, he wasn't offering comfort. He was issuing a challenge. He was saying, even here, especially here, you can choose what this suffering means. And that is freedom. Not escape, not indulgence, not rebellion for rebellion's sake, but conscious authorship. Imagine a bird born in a cage. One day the cage is opened, but the bird stays. Not because the door is locked, but because it doesn't know what it means to fly. And yet, one day, it moves. Not in panic, not in rebellion, but in slow, trembling courage. That first step outside isn't freedom either, but the decision to leave, to question, to try, that is. That's where your power lives, not in perfection, not in clarity, but in the willingness to look. The moment you ask, "What if this belief I hold isn't mine?" you start to dig beneath the surface of your life, and what you may find isn't a clean answer. It's not a master plan, it's something messier, your authentic self, scared, uncertain, but awake. So what now? What do you do when you finally realize you've been playing a game you didn't design? You rewrite the rules, slowly, thoughtfully. Not to be reckless, but to be real. You question what success means, what happiness costs, what failure teaches. You stop outsourcing your worth to approval, your identity to tradition, your joy to consumption. You learn to sit in silence and not fear it. You begin to recognize that pain is not your enemy, it's the proof you're alive. You stop chasing validation and start building meaning, and then, finally, you glimpse it. A life that feels truly yours, not because it's perfect, not because it's impressive, but because it's chosen. Chosen every day, chosen with awareness, chosen with soul. That's the liberation no system, no culture, no authority can ever touch. Because once you begin to see, you cannot unsee. Once you begin to feel your own mind awakening from its slumber, you can't go back. And though the world may still pull you, and your old patterns may still haunt you, you'll know the difference now. You'll know the taste of your own freedom. And once you've tasted that, you will never settle for the illusion again. So take the next breath, not as a follower of the script, but as the writer. Take the next step, not as a product of your past, but as a participant in your present. Question everything, even this, especially this. Because the moment you stop asking, the moment you settle into what's comfortable, freedom slips through your fingers once more. The world will always try to sedate you with convenience, numb you with distraction, and tempt you with certainty. But you, now awake, have seen the cost of unconscious living. You know what it means to wear someone else's mask. And more importantly, you now know how it feels to take it off. That is the ultimate truth. That is real freedom. Not escape, not rebellion, but radical self-possession. And it begins, not tomorrow, not someday, but now.